Hello there, everyone. I hope you're having a good week. I personally am having a hard time figuring out that it's June. It's like, where did the first 5 months of the year go? But it's that's the way it goes, right? So I'm guessing that you guys are having the same problem I have about that. Anyway, oh yeah, I guess it's part of the course that I need to say that yes, that is Penny back there. She's still that big lump is the Elizabethan collar. She had to go back into it and she'll be so happy when she doesn't have to wear that anymore. But I know that is for a lot of people, which is the end of the semester. And since I do a lot with students, and because I do teach regularly, uh, recently I've been hearing a lot of people. I guess you could say complain. They weren't exactly complaining as much as they were just making the statement that they're just having a hard time getting started writing whatever. Um, and so I've got something that works, at least works for me, and has worked for me for several years. But it also means, as I said, if you're an English teacher, go leave now because basically I'm telling you to totally ignore everything your English teacher taught. When I was in school, well, let me back up. When I talk to my students and they say they're having a hard time trying to get started on a paper, 9 times out of 10, 95 times out of 100, they're trying to start at the beginning. Why? Your English teacher told you to do that, right? I'm sure that there was, even if you didn't pay much attention in English class, somewhere along the line, there's this little voice in your head that says that you're supposed to start your paper with the introduction, the body, conclusion, and set up the paper. I remember in high school, and we had to write the assignment in which the assignment literally was, well, we were going to write a paper during the course of the term, but the assignment was is I had to write the introduction first. I tried, I tried, I tried. I couldn't do it. I hated that assignment. Absolutely despised the assignment. I couldn't do it. I never have been able to write the introduction first. Well, back up. Generally, I cannot write the introduction first. I would say more often than not, I can't. On occasion, I might have been able to, but usually that was because I knew exactly what I wanted to do and had everything planned out in my head. That's not usually what happens when I write most of my papers, and it's probably not what's happening to you if you're having trouble writing. So if your English teacher's not around, and I may be, in a sense, the closest thing to an English teacher that you could actually point to and say something, and I'm not your English teacher, and I'm not peering over your shoulder saying, what are you doing? So who says you have to write it first or write the introduction first? Don't bother doing that. If you're sitting there and have to start writing, you've got a paper or a presentation or something that you have to write as to, just start writing. If you ever read anything about authors, people who write for a living, write novels and everything, like Ernest Hemingway and everybody like that, they jump in and usually they said they just had a hard time. They made a point of writing every single day. And usually when they sat down to write, they had the same thing that you had, looking at that blank page and figuring out what to do. They just started writing gibberish. And sooner or later, it started flowing into something. And sooner or later, that got into whatever it is that they were trying to do. Basically, if they can get paid big bucks, like if Ernest Hemingway and I think Steinway and a bunch of Steinbeck and a bunch of other people were able to do it, why can't you? When you're looking at that blank page or on the computer, just start writing something, whatever it is you know about that particular topic, even if it's not much of anything. If you've got a couple of note cards, start writing them and putting something about those things in them. Don't copy the note cards unless the note cards are in your own words. If you've copied a note card and you've got a quote down there from something else, do not copy that on your paper. Don't. Just get rid of that. Take a look at the note card and just sort of say, okay, what does this mean to me? And start putting that on your page. Okay? Then maybe get another note card, translate that into your own words and put it on page. Just start writing something somewhere. Generally, if you've got any idea whatsoever about the topic that you're writing about, just start writing something about a part of that particular topic and keep going. There's nothing that anybody says that the introduction has to be done first. I've actually had a couple of papers in my life that I've written the conclusion first because I knew where I wanted to go. So I ended up writing the conclusion first, looked at that, figured out what I needed to do to get to that point, and essentially wrote, shall we say, backwards. Because once I knew the end result and how I wrote that conclusion more or less gave me a couple of clues about how I was going to progress in my argument to get to that point, Then I was able to figure out how to do the body, which then made me able to write the introduction. In other words, I wrote the introduction last, but I wrote the introduction after I basically finished writing the paper. When I was in high school, when they gave me that assignment, the teacher was, shall we say, kind enough to let us know what we were supposed to be writing before. I don't know, we were going to write on Shakespeare or whatever we were writing on. I wrote the entire paper first. Then I broke it down into to do whatever she wanted to do. So the first assignment was write the introduction. So I just copied the paper and gave her these. And she wanted the body, so I took out the body. I had already written the paper. I just gave her the sections of the paper that she wanted me to do and made a few changes here and there so that the end result was what she wanted us to do. But I'd already written that weeks before. I've never been able to write the introduction. Just sit down and look at a blank paper and write the introduction first. It just doesn't come to me that way. And I don't think it comes to most people that way. Is it in my experience and from what I've done with talking with a lot of students, is that most people don't know how they're setting that paper up. So I don't really know why teachers tell you how to do that. I know when you write a paper, the paper's got the introduction first, so it would seem like you're supposed to write the introduction first. But if you don't know what you're doing on that particular topic, it's really, really hard to start out that way. And I'm sure you've been there before because that's probably why it's hard to write paper, right? So if you've got a point, as I said before, if you've got something that you know about, write about that. Maybe then another point you write. Then figure out how the two things go together and then start putting your pieces together. And then once you've got something, you may, like me, end up writing the body, the conclusion, and then going back and doing the introduction. You may do the body, then the introduction, then the conclusion. Ladies and gentlemen, once it's finished and you're ready to submit it, nobody but you and anybody else you might have told is going to know how you did it. They're not peering over your shoulder looking at you. You're not submitting something. And the odds that you're going to be having to tell somebody how I wrote this, and this is, you're writing the introduction first, so you're giving it to your boss or your teacher, that's probably long gone. It's possible, I suppose, if somebody still does that in an English class in a college. I'm not really aware that they do it, but maybe some people do. And again, for me, I would go and write the whole paper, or at least get started on the paper, write the body, and then go back and do it. Just because they say, or the idea is that if you write the paper, you've got to start with the introduction, doesn't mean you need to do it. I'm giving you permission to totally ignore that particular rule. Unless you've got a class, unless somebody sits there and says, I want to see the introduction, and you've got to write the introduction to give it to them, you still can write something else first before you write the introduction. Then just give them the introduction and satisfy their curiosity or whatever it is that's making them write the introduction. So does this help? I mean, you don't really need to write that introduction first. Start with whatever comes to mind and then build your paper from that. Now, you're going to say, well, I don't know anything about the paper. Well, that means you have to go back and do some research, which is a totally different topic. But even so, do a little bit of research, start putting some things on the paper. They don't necessarily have to flow at that point. If you're starting out, really, really starting out, what you're basically trying to do is just get something on the paper, on the screen, however you're doing it. I still, to some degree, sometimes will write things out by longhand. I remember when I switched, when I grew up and started to learn to write and everything was on paper and pencil. It took me a long time to start figuring out how to do it on the computer. Finally managed to make that transition, but still sometimes I have to go back and do it on paper. Not sure why. Maybe it's just the topic. I never really paid that much attention to why I do it. But anyway, the idea is to start doing things and putting something down on paper because that's really all you're trying to do. Is get something put down on paper. Then once you've got it put on paper, and this may be one benefit to doing it on paper, you can then draw lines and say, I'm going to do this here. I'm moving this paragraph here. Let's take this sentence down here. And you're moving all that around until you get to something that makes sense to you. You can still sort of do that on the computer, but it's a little bit more complicated, not in the sense of, just being able to watch what you're doing. Because if you move something around and say, no, I don't want that here, it's back here, and then you get confused and everything else like that. But anyway, whatever works for you. The idea is to start doing something. But that doesn't mean you have to start, quote, at the beginning. Does that make sense? Does that help? Let me know if this actually helps you, or if you feel freer when you know that you don't have to write, from the introduction first. Seriously, I seriously mean that there's been occasions in which I've written a conclusion first. And I've even had a couple of papers published. I've done graduate school papers, and sometimes I've written a conclusion first. I haven't written an introduction first since high school, and that's been a little time ago. And it hasn't bothered me at all not writing the introduction. And I don't think it's going to bother you. Okay? So I hope this is helpful. Let me know. And if you got questions about it, or you want more, because I realize that, well, maybe not at this time of year. Some of you aren't going to be in school, or people are taking off for the holiday or something. But if you do have questions about writing, let me know. It's one of the things I can do. I don't consider it the best skill I've got, but it's apparently better than most people. So just say something, and let me know what you'd like to hear. Okay? So I hope this was useful. I hope it was helpful. And let me know, and have a good week, and we'll chat with you later. Bye.